Yeah, we're jumping straight into that thick haze of unanswered questions surrounding the JFK assassination, where the real mystery kicks in, not with the bullets, but with what happened to the people who saw too much. It's 1963, November 22nd, rips open a wound in America that never quite heals. But the story doesn't end there, in Dealey Plaza. No, it stretches out, gets darker, because an eerie number of witnesses start dropping off, dying in ways that make you pause, light another cigarette, and wonder. These aren't random folks. They're the ones with stories or evidence that poke holes in the official line. The lone gunman tale. And their ends? They line up too neatly with big moments. Investigations heating up, books about to drop, probes getting too close. Take Lee E. Bowers Jr., a railroad worker with a clear view from his tower. He spots a flash behind the grassy knoll, right as the shots echo. Something that screams, not just one shooter. Then, a couple years later, Bowers dies in a single car crash. No other vehicles involved, just him veering off the road. Coincidence? Maybe, but it fits the pattern. Or Dorothy Kilgallen, that sharp-tongued journalist who lands an exclusive with Jack Ruby, starts piecing together her own explosive take. She's got a manuscript brewing, full of dynamite details. Then poof, she's found dead, and that manuscript vanishes into thin air. Overdose, they say, but her notes? Gone, like they never existed. Then, there's Lieutenant Commander William Bruce Pitzer, a Navy guy who supposedly films the autopsy at Bethesda. That footage could rewrite everything, show wounds that don't match the story. Pitzer turns up dead, suicide, officially, and whatever film he had, lost to the shadows. David W. Ferry enters the picture when Jim Garrison starts digging in New Orleans. Ferry's linked to Oswald, has ties that smell like conspiracy. And just as Garrison's probe ramps up, Ferry dies, ruled a natural death. But the timing? Razor-sharp suspicious. Don't forget Roger D. Craig, a deputy sheriff who sees things in Dealey Plaza that contradict the Warren report. He survives a few attempts on his life, only to die later. Another thread snapped. These aren't isolated dots. They're a constellation of loss, deaths, disappearances, evidence vanishing right when it matters most. And the numbers? They scream foul play. Back in 1967, the London Sunday Times runs the math. The odds of so many key witnesses dying like this? 1 in 100 quadrillion. That's not chance. That's the kind of statistic that keeps you up at night. The government pushes back through the House Select Committee on Assassinations in Volume 4. They widen the pool of witnesses, crunch new numbers, say it's all within actuarial norms. But here's the rub. Even critics call it a limited hangout, admitting a little to hide a lot. They explain away the broad strokes, but that tight cluster of high-value deaths? Still hanging there, unexplained, like smoke in a closed room. You know how these things go. Official reports tie up the loose ends, but the real knots stay buried in the dark. It all circles back to one gnawing question. Why does this web of fatalities and missing pieces spike exactly when independent eyes start looking too hard? Films gone, notes evaporated, lives cut short. It's the enigma that pulls you in, demanding answers that official stories just sidestep. And it's that puzzle, that shrouded flash in Dealey Plaza, that drives us deeper. Next, we'll pull back to the world before 63, the tensions and shadows that made the assassination hit like a thunderclap, and set off the cover-ups that followed. We've touched on those shadows lingering after the shots in Dallas, the way witnesses seemed to vanish like smoke. But to really get why that day hit like it did, we need to step back into the America that came before, the one simmering under Cold War pressures. Picture the early 1960s, a nation locked in a staring contest with the Soviets, every shadow hiding a potential spy. Every headline screaming about missiles and communists. Trust in the government? It was already fraying at the edges. People were starting to whisper about secret ops, hidden agendas, the kind that made you question who was really pulling the strings. And right in the middle of it all, Cuba loomed large. Anti-Castro militants were everywhere, fired up and ready to take down Fidel any way they could. The CIA was neck-deep in it, running covert operations to topple the regime, sometimes teaming up with folks you'd never expect. Enter organized crime. Yeah, the mob. Guys like Sam Giancana, the Chicago boss, got tangled in these CIA anti-Castro plots. It was a marriage of convenience, spies and gangsters sharing beds, all in the name of fighting communism. You know how these things go. Alliances forged in the dark, with no one asking too many questions. Then there were the operators on the ground, like David Ferry. This guy was a pilot, an anti-Castro activist out of New Orleans, buzzing around with militant groups plotting raids and supply runs. Ferry popped up later in Jim Garrison's probe, raising eyebrows about his ties to all sorts of shady dealings. And don't forget George de Mohrenschildt, a petroleum geologist with occasional CIA contacts. He befriended Lee Harvey Oswald in 1962, right there in Texas. De Mohrenschildt moved in circles where intelligence types, political operatives, and even criminal networks blurred together. It's like the lines between good guys, bad guys, and everyone in between just dissolved. This was the world in 1963, a web of suspicion where anti-Castro fervor mixed with mob muscle and CIA whispers. The public felt it, that growing distrust in institutions, the sense that power played by its own rules. So when those shots rang out in Dallas, it didn't just shock the nation, it cracked open all those doubts. Suddenly, alternative stories didn't seem so far-fetched, not in a country already primed for conspiracy. Investigators and the media? They waded into this mess, their responses shaped by the same fractured trust. Next, we'll piece together the hours and days before that November afternoon, following Oswald's steps and the first voices from Dealey Plaza. All right, with the shadows of the Cold War looming large, it's time to zero in on the guy who ended up in the crosshairs, Lee Harvey Oswald. Oswald wasn't some random drifter. He had a history that twisted through military service a defection to the Soviet Union, and then a quiet return stateside. By early 1963, he's back in the US, bouncing around New Orleans and Dallas, mixing with folks who raised eyebrows even then. Take George de Mohrenschildt, for instance, a Russian expatriate with oil connections and a knack for knowing people in high places. De Mohrenschildt befriended Oswald and his wife Marina, introduced them around, shared meals. But was it just neighborly? De Mohrenschildt had ties to the CIA, or so the rumors went. He later testified about Oswald, but his story shifted like sand. Then there's David Ferry, the eccentric pilot out of New Orleans, anti-Castro crusader, known for his wild wigs and even wilder schemes. Ferry crossed paths with Oswald through the Civil Air Patrol back in the day, and some say their connection lingered. Oswald's handing out pro-Cuba leaflets in New Orleans that summer, getting into scuffles, drawing attention from the FBI. By October, he's landed a job at the Texas School Book Depository in Dallas, overlooking Dealey Plaza, of all places. His movements get murky. Witnesses spot him here and there, but timelines don't always match up. Deputy Roger Craig swears he saw Oswald fleeing the scene in a station wagon, not the bus and cab the official story claims. These disputes start bubbling up right away, setting off alarms for early skeptics. Enter Mark Lane, the lawyer who wouldn't let it go. In 1966, he starts digging, interviewing witnesses the Warren Commission glossed over. Lane talks to folks at Dealey Plaza, piecing together accounts that poke holes in the lone gunman narrative. One standout is Lee E. Bowers Jr., the signalman up in the Union Terminal Tower, with a clear view over the rail yards. Bowers tells Lane he saw two strangers lingering behind the picket fence on the grassy knoll, right before the motorcade rolled in. One in a plaid shirt, another in dark pants, both out of place, pacing, watching. Then, just as shots ring out, Bowers catches a flash behind the grassy knoll, like a muzzle blast, or something kicking up dust. He didn't think much of it at first, but later it haunted him. You know how these things go, clean on paper, messy in the dark. Other eyewitnesses chime in with contradictions, shots from the front, puffs of smoke, figures darting away. These stories clash with the official line, hinting at escape routes and accomplices nobody chased down. Oswald's web of contacts. These early sightings, they're the kindling, dry and ready, just waiting for the spark on November 22nd. And when it came, everything ignited. Next, we'll slow it all down, frame by frame, through the films and the eyes that saw it unfold. We've mapped out those shadowy connections and hidden views that set the stage for what was coming. Now, let's step right into the heart of it, that crisp November day in Dallas, where everything shattered in a matter of seconds. It's Friday, November 22nd, 1963. The sun's out, crowds line the streets of downtown Dallas, waving flags and cheering as the presidential motorcade rolls through. President John F. Kennedy sits in the back of that open-top Lincoln Continental, smiling, Jackie beside him in that pink suit. Governor Connolly and his wife are up front. The car's moving slow, maybe 10 miles an hour, turning onto Elm Street in Dealey Plaza. People are everywhere, on the grassy knoll, along the sidewalks, some perched on walls for a better look. Amateur filmmakers are scattered around, their cameras rolling to capture a piece of history. One of them is Abraham Zapruder, a local dressmaker, standing on a concrete pedestal with his Bell & Howell 8mm camera. He's filming the whole thing, steady as he can. Others have cameras too, folks like Orville Nix, Marie Muchmore, pointing lenses at the motorcade as it glides past the Texas Schoolbook Depository. The clock hits around 12:30 p.m. The first shot rings out. It sounds like a firecracker to some, maybe a backfire to others. Kennedy's hand goes to his throat, like he's been hit. Confusion erupts. People duck, look around. Is it part of the celebration? No, something's wrong. The president slumps forward slightly. Then the second shot. This one connects hard. Connolly jerks, yells out. Blood starts showing. Jackie turns to her husband, who's not moving right. Screams fill the air now. The driver hits the gas, but not before the third shot, the fatal one. It strikes Kennedy in the head, and just like that, the world changes. The car speeds off toward Parkland Hospital. Chaos in the plaza, people running, diving for cover, some thinking the shots came from the grassy knoll, others pointing to the depository building. Eyewitnesses later described the panic. Smoke in the air, the sharp crack of gunfire echoing off the buildings. No one knows for sure how many shots, where they came from. Those amateur films, they catch it all. The motorcade turning, the figures in the car, the horrifying sequence. Zapruder's footage especially, frame by frame, becomes this raw, unfiltered record. But here's the rub. In the scramble that follows, some of that evidence gets mishandled, lost in the shuffle. Testimonies clash, details blur. You know how these things go. Crystal clear in the moment, a fog of doubt by sundown. By afternoon, the focus shifts. Police swarm the book depository, find a rifle hidden near the 6th floor window, fingerprints, shell casings. It all points to one guy. Lee Harvey Oswald, a depository employee, slips out during the mayhem, but not for long. Less than an hour later, he's spotted in Oak Cliff, tangled in another shooting, Officer Tippit gunned down. Witnesses finger Oswald. He ducks into a movie theater, tries to hide. Cops move in, arrest him right there in the Texas theater. By evening, he's charged with the murder of the president. Oswald denies it all, calls himself a patsy. But the day's events, they've sealed his fate in the public eye. Those films and frantic accounts from Dealey Plaza, they plant the seeds for decades of debate, questions about what was seen, what was missed, what vanished. The assassination footage turns into this controversial cornerstone, evidence that's pored over, disputed, sometimes altered in the handling. It all starts here, in those split seconds, fueling conspiracies that won't die. And as the sun sets on Dallas, the real storm is just beginning. Next, we'll dive into the whirlwind 48 hours that follow, the interrogations, Ruby's deadly interruption, and a nation reeling in shock. So there we were, still reeling from that chaos in Dealey Plaza. Oswald locked up tight after his quick arrest. But the story didn't stop there. It accelerated, like a bad decision gaining speed down a dark alley. We're diving into those first 48 hours now, the ones that turned shock into something thicker, more tangled. November 24th, 1963, just 2 days after the shots rang out. Dallas Police Headquarters basement. Cops are moving Lee Harvey Oswald for a transfer. Cameras rolling, reporters crammed in like sardines. Then, out of the crowd, Jack Ruby steps forward. Nightclub owner, known around town, pulls a .38 and fires point blank. Oswald crumples, right there on live TV. He's rushed to Parkland Hospital, the same place Kennedy died. Doesn't make it. Dead by 1:07 p.m. Ruby, he gets grabbed immediately, but later he swears it was spontaneous. Just an impulse, he says. No plan, no deeper motive. You know how these things go. Clean on paper, messy in the dark. And just like that, the accused assassin's voice is silenced forever. No trial, no testimony, no chance to spill whatever he knew. Or didn't. The nation's watching, and the airwaves explode. Media scrambles, law enforcement tightens up, issuing statements faster than you can light a cigarette. But whispers start right away. How'd Ruby get in so easy? Public skepticism? It's embryonic, sure, but it's there, bubbling under the grief. Enter Dorothy Kilgallen, sharp as a tack, journalist with a nose for the real dirt. She scores private interviews with Ruby, not the quick press stuff, but real sit-downs. Hears things, jots them down in her notes. Then she announces she's writing a book, Murder One, she calls it. Promises it'll break the case wide open, expose what really happened. But those notes, that manuscript, they vanish later, seized or lost. Who knows? In those raw hours, it's all confusion and closure that feels too neat. Cops wrapping things up, media echoing the official line. Yet folks on the street start asking questions, quietly at first. Was it really that simple? Ruby just snaps. Oswald's dead, Ruby's talking spontaneous, and Kilgallen's digging deeper. The air's thick with what-ifs even then. And, as the dust settles from those 48 hours, the first formal probes kick off, doubts growing, witnesses stepping up with stories that don't quite match the script. So, we've sifted through that whirlwind weekend. The shots, the arrests, the sudden end for Oswald at Ruby's hand. Now the dust starts to settle, or at least that's what they wanted us to think, as the government steps in with its first big swing at the truth. Enter the Warren Commission, formed just days after the chaos, tasked with piecing it all together. President Johnson handpicks Chief Justice Earl Warren to lead it, rounding up a crew of senators, congressmen, and big shots from banking and intelligence. They dig in, interviewing hundreds, poring over evidence for months. And then, in September 1964, they dropped their final report, a thick tome concluding that Lee Harvey Oswald acted alone. No conspiracy, no accomplices, just one troubled guy with a rifle. It was meant to close the book, to let the nation heal. But you know how these things go. Clean on paper, messy in the dark. Almost right away, cracks appear. Public skepticism bubbles up, fed by whispers and stories that don't line up with the official line. Alternative witness accounts start popping up everywhere, like shadows in a dimly lit alley you can't quite shake. People who'd been there, in Dealey Plaza, swearing they saw things the commission glossed over or ignored. Take Roger D. Craig, a Dallas County deputy sheriff on duty that day. Craig testifies to the commission about what he claims he witnessed, stuff that throws a wrench in the lone gunman theory. He says he spotted a man who looked just like Oswald, fleeing the scene, jumping into a Nash Rambler station wagon driven by someone else. Not Oswald alone, mind you, but with a possible accomplice, speeding off while the real Oswald was supposedly catching a bus or something. Craig even gave a description: light green Rambler, driven by a dark-complected man. And that's not all. Up in the Texas Schoolbook Depository, where the shots came from, Craig says he helped identify the rifle found there. But here's the kicker. He swears it was a Mauser, a 7.65 German Mauser, stamped right on the barrel. Not the Italian Mannlicher Carcano that Oswald allegedly owned. Other officers backed him up at first, too. Yet the commission sticks with the Carcano story, dismissing Craig's account as a mistake or confusion in the heat of the moment. These kinds of contradictions pile up. Eyewitnesses talking about shots from the grassy knoll, not just the depository. Others seeing smoke or figures in places they shouldn't be. The official framework just doesn't hold all these loose threads. It's like trying to stuff a storm into a teacup. Bits keep spilling out. Public doubt grows, fueled by these stories circulating in newspapers, on radio, in hushed conversations. The Warren Report was supposed to be the end, but it feels more like the starting gun for a marathon of questions. Next, we'll look at how the bigger players, cops, reporters, politicians, took the reins and tried to steer the story in the years right after. We've been down this road before. Official stories wrapping up neat and tidy, while those alternative voices keep whispering from the shadows. Now, let's talk about how the big players stepped in to handle the mess, starting with the House Select Committee on Assassinations. Formed in 1976, the HSCA was supposed to dig deeper, hold hearings, and sort through the conspiracy claims that wouldn't die. They ran from 76 to 79, poking into everything from ballistics to those nagging questions about multiple shooters. But here's where it gets interesting. Their take on all those witness deaths that conspiracy folks pointed to as proof of a cover-up. The HSCA brought in Jacqueline Hess to crunch the numbers, and she authored this statistical rebuttal that basically said, hold on, those death rates aren't so suspicious after all. Hess expanded the witness universe, widened the pool to include way more people connected to the case, not just the core group everyone was focused on. By doing that, she argued the deaths fell within normal actuarial expectations. Nothing outside the ordinary for a group that size, over time. It was a clever way to blunt the claims, making the attrition look like random bad luck instead of targeted hits. Then, in their 1970 findings, the HCA dropped this bombshell. They concluded there was probable conspiracy, based on acoustic evidence from a police dictabelt recording that suggested more than 3 shots. But get this, they couldn't identify any participants. No names, no organizations, just a vague nod that, yeah, maybe Oswald didn't act alone. Researchers call this a limited hangout. Admit a little truth to hide the bigger picture. Control the narrative without opening the floodgates. You know how these things go. Clean on paper, messy in the dark. And it wasn't just about stats and vague admissions. Institutions got hands-on with evidence control, confiscating and suppressing whatever threatened the official line. Take Gordon Arnold, a soldier on leave who said he was standing on the grassy knoll that day, filming the motorcade. According to him, right after the shots, 2 men in suits approached, took his camera, and yanked out the film. Gone, just like that. Then there's Beverly Oliver, who called herself the Babushka Lady, caught on other footage wearing a headscarf, filming from the opposite side. She claims an FBI agent showed up at her door days later, demanded her film, and that was the last she saw of it. These aren't isolated stories. They paint a pattern of quick grabs to keep potentially damning visuals out of circulation. And don't forget Dorothy Kilgallen, the journalist who interviewed Jack Ruby and was piecing together her own explosive story. Her notes and manuscript vanished after her death, no trace, as if they never existed, feeding right into the suppression narrative. The HSCA looked into some of this, but their efforts often felt like checking boxes, not ripping open sealed files. Obfuscation through stats, a half-confession on conspiracy, and outright control of evidence. That's how institutions responded, keeping the lid on tight. It leaves you wondering what else got buried in those years of hearings and reports. Coming up, we'll turn our attention to a few key figures whose lives and ends throw even more shadows on the whole affair. Now that we've poked around the ways institutions try to tidy up the doubts, it's time to zero in on the people caught in the web. These weren't just footnotes in history. They were the ones clutching bits of truth that could shake things loose, each with their own drives and crossroads. Let's start with Dorothy Kilgallen, that sharp-witted columnist who syndicated her words across the nation. She wasn't one to shy from the spotlight, digging into stories that others might let slide. Her motivations? A blend of journalistic hunger and a knack for spotting the rot beneath the polish. Dorothy interviewed Jack Ruby, pulling threads that led her to work on a book called Murder One, a title that promised to lay it all bare. She held on to revelations that challenged the easy answers, positioning herself as a guardian of facts in a world quick to bury them. Her social circles crossed with the powerful, yet she dared to publish what others whispered in shadows. Then there's Roger D. Craig, the Dallas deputy sheriff, with a front row seat to the chaos. Driven by a sense of duty that didn't bend to pressure, he testified about seeing Oswald bolt to a Nash Rambler, and he swore that rifle was a German Mauser, not what the reports later claimed. Craig survived attempts on his life, multiple times, which only fueled his resolve to keep the discrepancies in the light. He intersected with law enforcement circles, but his insistence on the truth marginalized him, turning him into an outcast for defying the scripted tale. As a custodian of eyewitness details, he embodied the pushback against narratives that didn't add up. You know how these things go. Voices like his get drowned out, labeled as trouble, while the machine rolls on. Shifting gears to Lee E. Bowers Jr., the signalman at Union Terminal, with eyes on the grassy knoll. His background was straightforward, railroad work, a steady job, but his vantage point made him key. Motivated perhaps by nothing more than honesty, he described a flash and unfamiliar faces in that spot, details that clashed with the lone gunman story. Bowers held critical testimony, a piece of evidence from his perch that could redirect the entire probe. His social ties were local, everyday, yet speaking out thrust him into a storm of scrutiny and eventual ostracization. He died in a single-car crash, no autopsy done, body cremated, leaving his words to echo without closure. And don't forget David W. Ferry, the New Orleans pilot, tangled in anti-Castro activism. His motivations ran deep in political fervor, opposing Castro with a passion that linked him to shadowy networks. Central to Jim Garrison's investigation, Ferry became a suspect when probes heated up. He safeguarded connections and knowledge that bridged anti-communist efforts with a broader mystery. His death came days after the investigation went public, amplifying suspicions in a web of political intersections. These figures, Kilgallen, Craig, Bowers, Ferry, shared a common thread, daring to hold on to evidence that poked holes in the official line, often at great personal cost. Their backgrounds and drives paint a picture of resistance amid pervasive efforts to silence dissent. With these profiles in mind, it's time to dissect the official narrative itself, highlighting the paradoxes and contradictions that refuse to stay buried. Now that we've gotten to know the faces behind these tangled tales, it's time to dig into the raw facts that poke holes in the lone gunman story. These aren't just loose threads, they're full-on contradictions that keep you up at night, wondering what really went down. Let's start with the rifle. Eyewitnesses couldn't even agree on what they saw. The official line points to a Carcano, but some swore it was a Mauser. That's not a small mix-up. Take Roger D. Craig, a deputy sheriff right there in Dealey Plaza. He testified to the Warren Commission about spotting a Mauser rifle on the 6th floor of the book depository. But that detail got buried, contradicting the commission's final word. Craig didn't stop there. He described seeing a man fleeing in a Nash Rambler station wagon, totally at odds with the official escape route. You have to ask, why would his account get dismissed so quickly? Then there's Buddy Walthers, another deputy on the scene. He reported finding a .45 slug in the grass near the plaza. Nothing like what a Carcano would fire. That bullet vanished from the record, but it screams inconsistency. Shifting to the medical side, the doctors at Parkland Hospital were the first to treat the wounds. They described entry points and trajectories that didn't match up at all with the Bethesda autopsy photographs and x-rays. Parkland staff saw one thing in Dallas, but the official images from Bethesda told a different story. It's like two puzzles from different boxes forced together. And evidence? It had a habit of disappearing. Dorothy Kilgallen's notes from her exclusive interview. They went missing right after her death. What secrets did those pages hold that someone wanted gone? Then there's Lieutenant Commander William Bruce Pitzer, who allegedly filmed the autopsy on 16mm. That footage never surfaced. Pitzer died under questionable circumstances soon after. Amateur films from Dealey Plaza got seized too. The Babushka lady's reel, Gordon Arnold's shots. Authorities took them and, poof, they're lost to history. You know how these things go. Evidence slips away when it's most inconvenient. All this ties into a cluster of suspicious deaths that spiked during key investigations. During the Warren Commission, the Garrison Probe, and the HSCA, people connected to the case started dropping. Coincidence? Maybe, but the timing feels too neat, too clustered to ignore. These contradictions linger like smoke in a back alley, refusing to clear. Up next, we'll stack them against the official government line and see how the evidence holds up, or doesn't. All right, with those contradictions hanging in the air like smoke from a cheap cigar, let's turn to the official line, the one that's supposed to tie it all up neat and tidy. We're talking about the Warren Commission first, that blue ribbon panel set up right after the shots rang out in Dallas. They spent months digging, interviewing, piecing together what happened on November 22nd, 1963. And their conclusion? Lee Harvey Oswald acted alone. No conspiracy, no shadowy cabal pulling strings. Just one troubled guy with a rifle and a grudge. Fast forward to the late 70s, and Congress gets back into it with the House Select Committee on Assassinations, or HSCA for short. They revisited the whole mess, looked at new evidence, even tackled those nagging doubts about witnesses dropping like flies. But in the end, they backed the Warren Commission's core finding. Oswald was the lone gunman. Now, on those witness deaths, the ones that fuel so many theories, the HCCA didn't just shrug them off. They brought in the numbers, expanded the pool of who counts as a witness, and crunched the stats. Turns out, when you widen that net to include everyone even remotely connected, the deaths start looking like statistical normalcy. Actuarial probabilities kick in. Life expectancies, average mortality rates in that era. It's not a cluster of mysteries, it's just the grim math of human existence. They laid this out in Volume 4 of their report, with a section penned by Jacqueline Hess, one of their staffers. Hess dived into the claims of unusual death rates and came back with a rebuttal grounded in cold, hard data. She argued that if you define the witness universe broadly enough, thousands of people touched by the investigation, the odds even out. No need for foul play, it's all within expected bounds. Take the case of David Ferry, that eccentric pilot with ties to Oswald. He died in '67, right as Jim Garrison's probe was heating up. The autopsy? Ruptured berry aneurysm. A blood vessel in his brain gave way. Natural causes, plain and simple, according to the coroner. Then there's Lieutenant Commander William Bruce Pitzer, the Navy guy who supposedly filmed the autopsy. Found dead in '66 with a gunshot wound. Official ruling. Self-inflicted. A suicide. No evidence of anything else, despite the whispers. The government leaned hard on this approach. Diversify the witness list, apply actuarial probabilities, and suddenly those tragic coincidences aren't so extraordinary. It's their way of blunting the claims, saying, look, life's full of untimely ends. No grand plot required. You know how these things go. Numbers don't lie, but they sure can whisper sweet nothings to the skeptics. So, that's the official story, wrapped up with stats and coroner stamps. In contrast, we'll next dive into the alternative narratives alleging systematic silencing and coordinated cover-ups, revealing their supporting incidents and motivations. We've laid out the official line, that lone gunman story, holding up like an old reliable trench coat. But now, let's slip into the shadows and chase the whispers of something uglier, a coordinated cleanup, cold and calculated. Picture this theory, not some wild yarn, but a grim hypothesis pieced together by those who've dug deep. It points to a tangled web. Intelligence agencies pulling strings, organized crime handling the muscle, anti-Castro militants fueling the fire, and rogue actors tying up loose ends. All of them, supposedly, working in the dark to silence voices and bury evidence after that fateful day in Dallas. The timing alone raises eyebrows, clusters of suspicious deaths spiking right when probes heat up. During the Warren Commission's run, then Jim Garrison's bold investigation in New Orleans, and later with the House Select Committee on Assassinations. People dying just as they might spill something inconvenient. Coincidence? Maybe, but it stacks up oddly. Take Lee E. Bowers Jr., the railroad tower worker who saw too much from his perch overlooking the grassy knoll. He ends up in a car crash that's never properly looked into. Details fuzzy. Questions left hanging in the Texas air. Then there's Lieutenant Commander William Bruce Pitzer, a Navy man with access to sensitive autopsy materials. Found shot in his office, circumstances that scream foul play to those paying attention, but officially, it's wrapped up meat. Dorothy Kilgallen, the sharp-tongued columnist sniffing around Oswald's connections, overdoses suddenly. Her manuscript vanishes, notes gone, like they evaporated into the night. You know how these things go, clean on paper, messy in the dark. Evidence disappears too, not just people. The Babushka Ladies film, that mysterious woman capturing the scene on camera. Poof, seized or lost forever. Gordon Arnold's amateur footage from the knoll, same story. Confiscated, never to surface. Autopsy films, recordings from bystanders, all missing or locked away, feeding the notion of a deliberate scrub. And the attacks on survivors? Roger D. Craig, the deputy sheriff who claimed he saw Oswald fleeing in a station wagon. He dodges multiple attempts on his life, shots fired, cars trying to run him down, before his death gets ruled a suicide. Skeptics argue it's all too convenient, pointing to figures like Sam Giancana, the mob boss murdered just as congressional probes into intelligence ops ramp up. Giancana, with his ties to the CIA and anti-Castro plots, silenced before he could testify. Researchers call this official obstruction, with partial disclosures doled out as limited hangouts, just enough truth to distract from the bigger secrets. It's a theory that paints a picture of systemic silencing, a cleanup crew operating in the underbelly, protecting powerful interests. Whether you buy it or not, these incidents linger like smoke in a back alley, hard to ignore. But chasing these shadows takes a toll, as we'll see next, the personal wreckage left on those who dare to dig. We've dug into those whispers of cover-ups and vanished evidence, the kind that leaves you questioning everything. But now let's talk about the real toll, the shattered lives of folks who wouldn't let it go, the ones who paid for poking at the truth. Take Roger D. Craig, a Dallas deputy sheriff back then. He saw things that day that didn't match the official story, and he said so, loud and clear. What did that get him? Fired from the department, for starters. Then came the close calls. A car forced off the road in 73. An assault the next year that left him hanging on by a thread. He survived those, somehow. But in 75, they found him dead. Ruled a suicide. Yeah, you know how these things go. Clean on paper, messy in the dark. Then there's Dorothy Kilgallen, the journalist who was building a case, interviewing sources no one else dared touch. She had notes, a manuscript in the works that could have blown it all open. But in 65, she turns up dead. And poof, those papers vanish. Her whole investigation erased like it never happened. Makes you wonder who benefits from that kind of silence. Down in New Orleans, Jim Garrison, the district attorney, he went all in. He prosecuted Clay Shaw in that trial that gripped the nation, pointing fingers at bigger forces. But around him, people started dropping, suspicious deaths piling up as he pushed for answers. Garrison himself faced smears, marginalization that turned him into a punchline for some. Witnesses who backed him, they got the same treatment, pushed to the edges, their stories doubted or dismissed. And don't forget Sam Giancana, the mob boss, whose name kept surfacing in those congressional intelligence probes. In 75, right before he could testify, he's murdered in his own home. Timing like that? It doesn't feel random. All these threads wove into a bigger mess, a culture where doubt festers, where conspiracy books like Crossfire hit the shelves in 89 and keep the fire burning. From there, it spread into the 21st century, with record releases that tease more questions, researchers digging year after year. Skepticism became the norm. Justice feels like a distant memory. Lives shattered, truths buried, That's the fallout that echoes still. Our penultimate segment will examine lingering, unresolved questions and mysteries that defy closure even decades later. After sifting through the wreckage left in the wake of that fateful day and the doubt it sparked everywhere, we're left staring at the loose ends, the ones that twist and turn without ever tying off neatly. These aren't just footnotes in some dusty report. They're the nagging doubts that keep researchers up at night, poring over faded documents in quiet rooms. Take Lee E. Bowers Jr., for instance, the railroad tower man, who saw too much from his perch overlooking the grassy knoll. He dies in a car crash, and what do the authorities do? No autopsy reported, body cremated quick as you please. Why skip the basics like that? It leaves you wondering what they didn't want anyone to find under the skin. Then there's Lieutenant Commander William Bruce Pitzer, the Navy man rumored to have held onto some autopsy films or stills from that day in Dallas. Alleged possession, sure, but it's all unconfirmed now. Those materials vanished like they were never there. What happened to them? Who decided they were better off gone? And why? And don't get me started on the babushka lady, that mysterious woman with her headscarf and camera capturing who knows what from the sidelines. Her film gets confiscated, reportedly, and it's never seen the light of day since. Who took it? What was on there that somebody couldn't risk letting out? You know how these things go. Evidence slips away in the shadows, leaving just enough trail to drive you crazy. The authorities had their tricks too, like how the House Select Committee on Assassinations expanded the witness universe on purpose. They widened the pool to dismiss those clusters of suspicious deaths, making the patterns look like random noise. Why bother with that sleight of hand? Were the clusters hitting too close to something real? Evidence keeps disappearing. Dorothy Kilgallen's notes and manuscript, gone without a trace, along with amateur films that might have shown a different angle. These aren't isolated slips. They're a pattern of vanishing acts, timed just when probes heat up or publications loom. Witness deaths pop up with suspicious regularity right as new inquiries start or books hit the shelves. Official rulings call them natural or suicides, but the timing, that's the rarity that bites. Researchers like Jacqueline Hess have pointed this out, digging into the stats and shaking their heads at the odds. Later revelations keep trickling in, from National Archives releases in the 1990s and 2000s, mining those FBI surveillance logs and declassified documents. They uncover persistent anomalies, bits that don't fit the clean narrative, threads that pull at the whole fabric. These aren't wild theories. They're open questions, defying explanation year after year. Why no autopsies in key cases? What really vanished with Pitz's materials? Who silenced the babushka lady's film? The expansions, the disappearances, they all leave us with puzzles that haunt the story, refusing to fade. With these unresolved threads still dangling, let's step back and weave it all together, pondering what these witness deaths truly mean for the truth we've been chasing and the history we think we know. So, after digging through all those tangled threads and nagging inconsistencies in the JFK aftermath, we're pulling back to the core of this whole mess. The central question that's been lurking in the background all along: why did this bizarre cluster of witnesses and evidence keepers just vanish, die off, or lose their grip on crucial bits right when investigations heated up or books were about to drop? It's not just bad luck. Statistically, it's off the charts. Too many coincidences stacking up against the odds. We've weighed the official stories, those tidy explanations that wrap everything in a bow, against the wilder claims of deep conspiracies. And here's where it gets interesting. Who stood to gain from keeping the lone gunman tail intact? From ensuring no loose ends flapped in the wind? Think about it. Intelligence agencies, maybe, with their fingers in every pie, protecting secrets that could topple empires. Or organized crime, those shadowy syndicates that thrive on silence and fear, making sure their dealings stayed buried. Don't forget the anti-Castro militants, furious and connected, who might have seen chaos as their best revenge. And then there are the rogue actors, the unknowns slipping through the cracks, motivated by God knows what. What would drive a coordinated effort to clean house? Power. Probably preserving a narrative that keeps the public docile, or covering tracks that lead to uncomfortable truths. Some call it a limited hangout, where just enough leaks out to satisfy the curious, but the real dirt stays locked away. You know how these things go, neat and official on the surface, but a tangled web of favors and threats underneath. This whole saga has reshaped how Americans see their own history, planting seeds of doubt that refuse to die. Trust in institutions? It's taken a beating, with every poll showing public skepticism still running high, fueling books, docs, and shows right up to now. From 2017 releases to the latest podcasts, the questions keep coming, because the answers we've got just don't add up. It's poisoned the political imagination, turned us all into armchair detectives, wondering if we'll ever get the full story. And yet, investigations grind on. Dedicated folks chasing leads, piecing together what they can from the fragments left behind. So, who benefited from the silence? Maybe all of them, in their own ways. Or perhaps it's something bigger, a system protecting itself. It leaves you pondering the what-ifs, the shadows that linger long after the lights go out. We've tied these threads as best we can, but the knot's still loose. Next, we'll step back for those last thoughts on what this mystery means for us all. Even today. We've wrapped up that deep dive into the shadows of suppression and the shadows who might have gained from it. Now, let's step back and see what this tangled web means for us today, and where it might lead tomorrow. You see, those clustered deaths and vanishing evidence, they're not just footnotes in some dusty history book. They've become this dark emblem, a stark reminder of why so many folks don't trust the folks in power. It's like a wound that never quite heals, feeding into decades of stories that keep the fire burning. Books, films, you name it. They all circle back to that day in Dallas and the silence that followed. Take Jim Mars's Crossfire from back in '89. That book laid it out plain. pulling together the threads of conspiracy that official reports tried to snip away. Then there's Hit List by Richard Belzer and David Wayne, digging into those witness deaths like a dog with a bone. These aren't just reads, they're sparks that ignited a whole industry of doubt. And it's not slowing down. From 2017 right up to now, we've got ongoing publications, documentaries, even podcasts like this. One, all feeding that persistent cultural appetite. Why? Because digital access makes it easy. Anyone with a laptop can dive into the archives, question the narrative, and keep the skepticism alive. Speaking of archives, those rolling releases of previously classified JFK records since the 90s, they're like slow drips from a leaky faucet, each one stirring up fresh debates. The National Archives keeps unsealing bits and pieces, fueling independent researchers who pore over them in dimly lit rooms, chasing leads that official channels long buried. It's this ongoing public skepticism that refuses to fade. Every new release, every podcast episode, it chips away at the wall of secrecy, reminding us the story's far from over. Independent podcasters, citizen sleuths, they're the new guard, shaping narratives that big media might shy away from. With every thread they pull, the fabric unravels a bit more. You know how these things go. Truth gets buried under layers of redaction, but folks keep digging anyway, smirking at the official line. This cluster of deaths and disappearances, it's become a symbol etched into America's collective memory, a reminder of unresolved truths, of questions that echo through the years. It speaks to that deep-seated need for transparency. Even when the powers that be throw up smoke screens, we crave the light, no matter how dim. Archival discoveries keep popping up, hinting at more to come. Who knows what the next batch from the National Archives will reveal? But here's the thing. This isn't just history. It's a living controversy, sustained by our refusal to let it die. Podcasts like ours, books piling up, debates raging online, they all point to a future where the JFK story evolves, adapts, but never truly ends. In the end, it's about that human drive to uncover what's hidden, to push back against the obfuscation. We might never get the full picture, but damn if we won't keep trying. And as the echoes fade, that quest lingers, quiet and unyielding, in the back of our minds. This closing segment stands as the conclusion of our episode.